Okay, so Ukraine has just broken through in a significant way in the southern front of the counteroffensive. And I'm excited about that, but the question on everybody's mind right now is how long will it take to break through the next line, and what took so long? So we're going to watch a little bit of Arthur Ray. We're going to watch him give some of his analysis about what they faced and what they're facing and where they're going next. And then we're going to see two Americans interviewed, a Marine and former Navy, talk about like what they're really up against. So this analysis will help us kind of understand where we are and why it's taken as long as it has. So let's hear Arthur first.
What's up today? Not much. Nothing's happening really. The front line is stable, except for Ukraine broke through the Surovikin line.
Yeah, and a lot of us are feeling like this over here, like, yeah, there's something happening, and that's good, because we want to see some significant progress in Ukraine, but why is it not? We'll see.
You heard correctly. The Surovikin line, the first Russian defensive line, where in the last video I reported they have reached it. Well, today, one day later, I am reporting that they have broken through. Oh boy, I'm excited about it. I've done 2 days of a very realistic analysis of the Southern Front, but I will allow myself 1 day of pure happiness about what I'm seeing here. You see these black lines, the first ones, this is the second one, but the first one right in
Okay, so he's going to explain what gets in the way, so listen very carefully here.
In front of Verboga. Well, Ukraine today penetrated through it, and not on a very small area, but actually an area wide enough to push through whenever they want. This black line here has an anti-tank ditch, dragon's teeth, and infantry fighting positions, anti-tank guided missile positions, heavy machine gun positions, and trenches, and Ukraine has passed it.
Okay, did you hear everything that he listed there? Let me go back to that again so you can hear it.
Whenever they want. This black line here has an anti-tank ditch, dragon's teeth, and infantry fighting positions, anti-tank guided missile positions, heavy machine gun positions, and trenches, and Ukraine has passed it. Let's look at the proof.
That's a lot.
In this video you can see
that's what's slowing them down. See, the Ukrainians, while they were training, the Russians had 6 months to put in all those things into place to slow them down as much as possible. And that's the difference between here and the Kharkiv offensive, which just rolled people back because they were not prepared. So it's actually working like it's supposed to be working. Okay, let's move a little bit further in his analysis so we can see just what they're up against.
So I think Ukrainians will push back the Russians from the sides. That's my prediction, at least. Let's look at which units do Russians have against the Ukrainian best 82nd Brigade in this area. 3rd Bars, which is a reserve force. 11th Bars, which is also a reserve force. If I say reserve force with the Russian term, it means these are mobilized, they're low motivation, minimal training. It is one of the weaker parts of the Russian defensive line because of the units they have here. They're not great units, and Ukraine has the best one to face against them. 100 separate reconnaissance battalion, 417th reconnaissance battalion. So they have reserves and recon against Ukrainian best 82nd Brigade, who penetrated through the Surovikin line. I'm not gonna get tired of saying this. And you gotta forgive me for being so loaded about it today. Tomorrow we'll go back to the extremely realist analysis of things, but today I will allow myself 1 day of happiness. I've been waiting for this for so long. Now what I want to show you, my friends, what makes me even more happy is the distance between these two lines. It is 9.5 kilometers. 9.5, 8, 10. It is, let's say it's 10 kilometers, so it's nothing. You zoom out, these two lines are quite close to each other. 82nd penetrated the first Surovikin line, they will penetrate the next Surovikin line, and after that, empty grounds, empty grounds. Yes, I have reported on these forest belts which are loaded with troops, but again, it is real. Yes, it's hard to clear out these forest belts, but they are as loaded depending on which units Russians have there, and if they have reserves, and if they have recon units, no air assault brigades, no infantry or mechanized infantry brigades, then these forest belts will be manned with reserve troops. Low motivation, low morale, low training. So I'm looking forward for the 82nd of Ukraine to reach the second defensive line, and then we're talking the biggest, closest Russian strong point to the front line right now. My friend.
Okay, so that's what I wanted you to see. So they had a lot to overcome. They had layers of defense, but they can do it. They've done it before. They may very well be able to break through again, but it's taken longer than we would have thought. So why did it take longer? Well, this is a United 24 video that I thought was really well done. It had a couple of Americans explaining just what they're up against, or if our time frame is really realistic. So let's listen to that.
Hi everyone, my name is Zhenya Melnik, and here we have Nick and we have Chaz. They're both from America. Nick was in Marine Corps and Chaz was Navy. We have the ongoing summer campaign, which is called Ukraine counteroffensive, and there's going to be there was a lot of talk that it's moving slowly and not meeting someone's expectations. So let's maybe talk a bit about that. Why do you think it's moving at that pace, and what do we need to make it faster?
This is my favorite subject to talk about right now. I love this. Anybody who thinks this offense is not moving fast enough is more than welcome to come out with me on any of my patrols, and they will very quickly understand warfare isn't fought at a politician's pace. Ultimately, the enemy gets a say in it.
There's such good points. If the politicians got to decide, well, just do this, just do that, and it just worked, that'd be one thing. But there really is. It's not. You don't get to choose. The opposition gets to choose how they're going to oppose you, and that's the reality. And to reframe that is very important.
So specifically, why everybody is talking about it's moving slow. We gave you all this awesome equipment, and you did. And we appreciate it. It's being used very well. But there's two factors predominantly of why we're not seeing the huge gains of territory like we did last year. And that's not to say that this offensive is not being successful, because it is. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, like I said, the enemy gets a say. Over this winter, while we were training up and preparing for this attack, the enemy was also preparing for the attack. Last year we saw these huge gains of territory, and that's because basically our enemy hadn't had time to establish a defense in depth, which they now have. They had about 6 months while we were training to attack. They were preparing their defenses. So the enemy now has what's known as a defense in depth. They have multiple layers that we have to break through each time.
Okay, look at this again. Dragon's Teeth, minefield, infantry trenches, anti-tank trench, Dragon's Teeth again, dugout for vehicle. It's the same thing that what you just saw. You have to get through these layers of defenses, and it takes time. It's a difference between if I was just walking down a field as opposed to if there's a entire football team on the other side trying to stop me from getting to the other side of the field. That's the kind of thing that we're dealing with.
So it's not like we get past the first one and now we can, drive for 300 kilometers. There's now another layer that we have to defeat, and the whole process starts over and over again. And again, that's not to say that we're not being successful, but it's going to be a slower pace than we saw before. And the second biggest factor of why it's not moving as fast as all the fucking pundits want it to is attacks and assaults are very complex operations, especially when we're talking at the theater level, right? There are generals, colonels, whatever, that are coordinating multiple units across hundreds of kilometers of front lines in order to do these attacks that are very complex. And it's difficult work. It's literally, it comes down to you're jumping in a trench with other people and fighting for your life, right? It's a gunfight in a phone booth. It's difficult, and it's complex. There's a lot of moving parts. You have to coordinate supporting fires, multiple levels of supporting fires. You have to coordinate different maneuver elements. You have to coordinate armor, casevacks, all sorts of stuff.
So this is far more complex than anything that I would try to explain to you myself, so I'm letting experts try to explain it. But I'm whelmed by the level of analysis and detail and things that need to be coordinated. So, when I say, why isn't it taking longer? It's easy to do that or why isn't it taking less time? It's easy to do that from the high seats. It's not so easy to do that when you're on the ground. And I hope that that's what you're taking away from this explanation.
So yeah, it's not going to be that giant breakthroughs we saw last year, but that doesn't mean it's not a success. I think another factor is a lot of people, everybody throws around Western standard, NATO standards, and Western this and Western that. And the West has never fought a war like this with the technology that's currently available.
Yep.
My background is...
And that's actually a really excellent point. Like, how we have fought in previous wars, we fight with significant differences and advantages, and the Ukrainians are really up against something, and man, they've just been amazing at adapting and overcoming these obstacles.
As a Marine infantryman, yes, we trained for conventional war against Russia specifically. We didn't call them Russia, but that's what all the tactics...
I found that really interesting, that comment, the first time I watched this. And yeah, what we were training for was a war against Russia. Why are we training for a war against Russia? Why is that commonly the thing? And I'm not getting into conspiracy theories, but it's because Russia has a reputation for being like the one that we would most likely have to fight. The reason that we have tanks just sitting in at the ready in like Germany, just sitting there, that we're not deploying to Ukraine or giving to Ukraine, is because if we had to get into it with Russia, we have these tanks at the ready. But it's because of our analysis that Russia could be the problem. So Russia is like the schoolyard bully that has the reputation to be the one to start the fights, and that's where we are.
We're based off of, right? Any Marine will know what range 400 is. It's based off of Russian trenches. Well, since the start of this war, Russia has updated how they're defending and stuff like that, right? We saw the giant trench systems outside of Bakhmut and different areas.
So there's a lot of people who don't understand warfare, right? They go about this whole money thing. It's like, oh, you're getting Abrams, and you have Leopard tanks, and all this great equipment. It's phenomenal equipment, but that doesn't make them... They're not magical, they're not a wonder weapon. Yeah. Like you said, if you have 6 months to plant mines, like there's not a tank in the world that is anti-mine. It's going to rip off a track. It's going to destroy it. Like, the crews will have a much higher survivability rate, but that piece of machinery is still going to be destroyed. And it's, to think we're just going to take 100 Leopards and just push all the way down to Crimea is a little absurd.
And I think some people had some unrealistic expectations that, well, now you have this, now you can just go and barge right in and no problem. But you're seeing a different picture by hearing them talk.
If you don't understand what's going on, on this ground level, and understanding how defense in depth that they have built up, it takes a long time to clear a minefield, especially to put an armored column of tanks through. That's why, everyone is, and again, a lot of these people are Westerners, and they're very used to seeing the American might, in Iraq, where we could cruise through with 1,000 tanks because we also had air superiority. We had every technological advantage. We had manpower advantage. We had the upper hand on every single thing. And here we don't have that. This is an asymmetric war. And by asymmetric war, both teams have essentially the same thing, so.
I think what he's trying to say is like there isn't a magical American answer that we can just apply to this, right? I think the Ukraine is doing a really good job of taking this technology from the West and applying it to the situation here. And anybody who says this assault is too slow is an idiot.
So hopefully that tempers your understanding and provides some realism. And what the Ukrainians have done with technology and adapting and overcoming has just been amazing. Go back just a couple of videos and see how they've attacked multiple cities with drones. They attacked with cardboard drones. Like, I mean, with a drone that costs a few $1,000s, they've taken out $80 million planes. It's pretty amazing.
I've been on the ground. I've been on the front lines. I will spend the rest of this week on the front lines, literally. It's going at a sustainable pace, from being able to maintain supply lines to keeping constant pressure on the enemy.
Keeping troops alive.
I think that's a large part of it too, is we're not willing to do human wave assaults and stuff like that. I think they're doing a really good job of adapting to the situation here, because this is a war that's never been fought. It's a mixture of World War I and everything in between, right? So
and that's such a great point. His last point. That is it's like kind of like World War One and kind of like World War Two and kind of like a more recent war with drones and that kind of. It's a very weird thing. It's not something that we're used to or have experienced before. Last little bit.
so it's very difficult coming from that traditional Western training to apply it here. And every day I learn something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is there isn't a magical Western answer to apply to this.
But they're doing such a great job in applying what they have and adapting it. Okay, I hope that that helps you understand both points of that. Like, they are breaking through and they are making progress, but it is slow, and it's going to necessarily be slow because they have this to overcome and that to overcome and the other thing and the other thing and the other thing, but they're doing it. And I hope that that's hopeful. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.